Good evening and welcome to tonight's Planning and Zoning and Board of Adjustment meeting on January the 8th, 2015. First order of business will be opening the Board of Adjustment agenda, and first order of business will be public hearings, which we have none tonight, so we'll just go into the regular meeting. And the first order of business will be minutes from our last meeting, which was last month, December the 4th.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the Board of Adjustment meeting for December 4th, 2014.
And setting on the Board of Adjustments tonight, again, just a reminder, will be myself, Mr. Costello, Mr. Deach, Mr. Schwab, and Mrs. Scott is absent, so Mr. Dickey will be the alternate. So look for a second for that.
Yes. Second.
Motion by Mr. Costello, second by Mr. Dickey to approve the minutes as submitted. Any questions or comments? Roll call vote.
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Mr. Deach?
Abstain, I was not present at the meeting.
Mr. Costello?
Yes.
Mr. Schwab?
Yes.
And Mr. Dickey?
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0 with one abstention. And the next order of business will be the election of officers. And do we have 3 officers for that? Is that what we have for the Board of Adjustment? We have a chair, vice chair, and is it called secretary?
Secretary.
Mm-hmm. And right now, that's currently myself would be the chair, Mr. Costello would be the vice chair, and Mrs. Scott would be secretary, if I'm correct. So we'll open up the nominations for individual or all, or however you want to handle it. So
I move that we continue the same slate of officers for the future.
I would say that that's shocking, but it's not.
Second.
Mr. Deach coming from you. And second by
Second.
Mr. Dickey. So we have a motion by Mr. Deach, second by Mr. Dickey to keep the same slate of officers for the next year. Any comments or questions? I guess we'll take a roll call vote.
Mr. Deach?
Yes.
Mr. Costello?
Yes.
Mr. Schwab?
Yes.
Mr. Dickey?
Yes.
And Mr. Barton?
Yes. Motion passes 5-0. And next order of business.
Next order of business is the findings of fact and conclusions of law for variance 34. As you guys well know, this was voted on last meeting, and this is just actually bringing back the written findings of fact and conclusions of law that state statute requires us to have. So if you guys approve it, then we'll have the chairman sign off on it and send a copy to the applicant on it. And it pretty much, we tried to really just focus on the findings you guys made at the meetings. I don't know if you guys had a chance to look at it, but it should be accurate. It is accurate. I mean, I
It
looked
looked
at
like
it, I was
it.
here, so. So if somebody wants to make a motion to approve it, then approve findings of and conclusions of law, then we'll have it approved.
I will make a motion to approve it as
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. Schwab, second by Mr. Costello to approve the findings of fact and conclusions of law regarding the setback variance approval request for 411 South Highway 47 that we had last meeting. Any questions or concerns? Roll call vote.
Mr. Costello?
Yes.
Mr. Schwab?
Yes.
Mr. Dickey?
Yes.
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
And Mr. Deach?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. And at this time, we'll close the meeting of the Board of Adjustments and open up the official meeting for our Plan and Zoning Commission meeting for January the 8th, 2015. And first order of business would be a public hearing. And that's the only public hearing we have on the agenda tonight is Appendix A.
So I'm going to do it from the seat,
That's
my
fine.
seat here, if you guys don't mind, because I have Jack's report. Jack's not here today.
Okay.
He is in, I believe, San Diego for his son who is in the Marine Corps. I think that's where he's at.
Mhm.
I'm sure it's somewhere warm.
Yeah. So, yeah, he was telling me, as I told him I would be here, we mentioned that it was going to be much warmer here. So in good Jack fashion.
Good for him.
So, if you give me a sec here. What we have here is a carryover from last meeting. During the December 14th Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, there was a discussion about the proposed text amendment to 405.210 home occupations. And Planning and Zoning Commission requested revising Appendix A to include daycare as a conditional use within the R2 and R3 zoning districts. For purposes of the public hearing, I would ask that a copy of the Planning and Zoning Officer's report be made a part of the record. The ordinances of the City of Warrenton by reference, and a copy of the publication notice, which is also, I believe, attached to Jack's report. Yes, it is. So that's all I have on the city's behalf for the public hearing.
Thank you. Anyone else speaking on behalf of the public hearing for Appendix A tonight? No, Steph? Thank you, Mr. Burke. Hello again.
Hi, I'm Tiffany Rivera, one of the co-owners. I'm Lacey Rivera, and we're here tonight to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else have us concern considering this public hearing tonight? Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing.
There's somebody else.
Sorry?
Nope, there's-
Sorry.
That's fine. Step on forward. Got some feedback.
Hi, I am not the applicant, but I am just here on behalf, saying that I am for it being changed.
Okay.
Can you state your
And-
name, please?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm Anna Farrar.
Okay.
I'm not sure how this works, I'm sorry.
That's fine. Oh, you're
Okay.
fine. Thank you, Anna. And anyone else have questions or concerns? Appendix A on public hearings. Hearing none, we'll close our public hearing and open up the regular planning and zoning meeting for tonight. And first order of business will be minutes from the December the 4th meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as submitted from the December 4th Planning and Zoning meeting.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Costello, second by Mr. Dickey, to approve the minutes as submitted. Any other questions or comments? Roll call vote.
Mr. Deitch,
Abstain, was not present on December 4th.
Mr. Cullum,
Yes.
Mr. Barton,
Yes.
Mr. Schoenfeld,
Yes.
Mr. Swab,
Yes.
Mr. Kohler,
I'll abstain as well, to absent.
Mr. Dickey,
Yes.
Mr. Durbin,
Yes.
Mr. Costello.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 with 2 abstentions and 1 absent. Next order of business will be, before we elect the officers tonight, I'd like to extend our sincere thanks to Mr. Schoenfeld. Tonight will be his last official business with the P&Z. We appreciate your service to the city and your community, and thank you for everything that you've done. We wish you nothing but the best in your future endeavors, and sorry that we're going to lose you, but we're excited for your things that you're going to do. So thank you again for your time.
Thank you.
Next, we'll again elect officers, and let's remind each other what those are at this time. Myself,
As chairman,
Chair.
Vice Chair is Scott Costello, and Secretary is Teresa Scott.
Mr. Deitch, you're up. Unless somebody else.
As
Well,
you-
hang on just a second. Unless.
No, I'm not gonna give it a chance, as usual.
As usual.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Deitch and a second by Mr. Dickey to keep the same slate of officers for the upcoming year. If anybody else, Mr. Kohler, you need to speak up for anything against that, or?
Oh, no.
This is your time to.
Is it too late to second?
Third, there you go. We have a motion by Mr. Deitch, second by Mr. Dickey to keep the same slate of officers once again for this year. Any questions or concerns? Roll call vote.
Mr. Cullum,
Yes.
Mr. Barton,
Yes.
Mr. Schoenfeld,
Yes.
Mr. Schwab,
Yes.
Mr. Kohler,
Yes.
Mr. Dickey,
Yes.
Mr. Durbin,
Yes.
Mr. Costello,
Yes.
and Mr. Deitch.
Yes.
Motion passes 9-0 with 1 absence. And Mrs. Scott will be happy. Kind of an unwritten rule that if you're absent, you automatically get something, right? Next order of business will be Appendix A. So, Mr. Gravel, do you need to?
Yes, we have the Planning and Zoning Officer's report, and we have a draft of, it was a very simple text draft, which basically what it was, and you can see this in your,
In the red.
in the red, which basically makes the child daycare, the business, conditional in R2 and R3. There was a discussion among staff, and I do want to talk a little bit about that, and also there was some concern about the board about this amendment that I want to bring to the Planning and Zoning Commission's attention. The concern is not specific to what they want to do in their proposed use. There was some questions raised from the board with regards to, number one, how can we make this provision sunset if they do come back and apply for a conditional use permit? And I do think that there's some accuracy to, I at least in my time as a municipal attorney have never seen something tied to a financial situation to say, well, as soon as you guys make this much money, then you have to move out, you have to go to business, you have to go to a business district or go to a commercial district. There are some things we can do with regards to time limitations where, say, for example, assume this passes, the applicant comes back and applies for a conditional use permit, that the conditional use permit can be, for example, for 6 months or 1 year or 2 years or something like that. And then it sunsets on that property, so it's not allowing over an extended period of time. That's something we can do. That's how I address that. But, you know, I know one of the things is, and maybe they can talk a little bit about that, is saying, well, as soon as we make enough money, then we want to move to a commercial building or a commercial structure. And I don't know that we can really put something like that on there, you know, tied to financials. I don't know that I'm really comfortable recommending something that, but we can put a time limitation. The second thing was there was some concerns regarding allowing generally a conditional use of a daycare, a commercial daycare in a residential neighborhood. There's a concern about the location of this property being on a cul-de-sac. For example, cul-de-sacs are the last areas plowed by snow, and some safety concerns about that, you know, by changing and making this text amendment, making it conditional, you know, you guys can put conditions on it, but you're going to have to grant a conditional, or you should grant a conditional use. It's a conditional use of the property. And obviously some concerns about not only this site specifically, loading and unloading, dropping off, after hours, traffic concerns in a residential, an R2 or R3 district, making this a conditional use in the entire district, and also citywide. By changing this to conditional for this one circumstance, you know, is there going to create a, you know, maybe not a rush of daycares, because as the applicant said, there's a lot of daycares out there operating that may not be legal. We just don't know about them. Or we would be dealing with enforcement through us and also probably through the Department of Social Services. But the concept of there's this allowed kind of in-home daycare that is not considered a daycare, that's less than this number of kids that are non-related by blood or marriage, but now we're allowing a actual commercial business that's not really a home occupation, or the concern is that you have a house that then becomes a commercial business, a true commercial business, and they come and apply for a conditional use permit. Kind of the concept of this then becomes what is in an R2 and R3 that's allowed. So I just wanted to kind of bring that feedback and some of those concerns and some of the discussions among staff about plowing of the streets and whatnot in this R2 and R3, the ingress egress issues. These are residential streets, they're built for residential, parking issues and whatnot that you know, I wanted to bring to your attention that were kind of discussed. But beyond that, we have the basic text amendment with the conditional in those two R districts. And I don't know if the applicants want to talk anything really, or if you guys want to say anything about it. But I want to make sure that the applicants know when I'm talking about these issues, it's not specific to your property. And I want to make sure you guys understand, because making this conditional in the R2 and R3 will then let anybody in an R2 or R3 district apply for a conditional use and allow them. So, you know, it's kind of more the general idea that you're going to now allow a commercial business in an R2 and R3. It is a daycare, but that it's still a commercial business. So
Right.
My first question I like the idea of the time restraint, because my question, just to refresh our memory from last month, you had talked about that the reason you're doing this is because you're kind of hitting the ground running, but your goal is to
Be in the
Yes.
commercial facility.
Right.
That's our long-term goal. I mean, we don't want to, we're consuming up her house right now
Sure.
because, I mean, she has 3 children, and on top of that, she has the added mess and chaos from the childcare as well. So
So my question back to you, just for clarification, let's say when this comes in front of us and we do start talking about that,
about their site specific.
well, yeah, or if we're gonna make this, yeah, because we will be strictly talking about them. But when somebody else would do the same thing, even though it's a separate issue, when you're talking about the time restraint, if you put that time restraint on there and then they still are not in a commercial, they could reapply for.
They could come back and ask for an extension of the
Right.
conditional use permit.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, but I think there's some valid concerns there.
Oh, no doubt.
About the conditional in those two districts that, when we discussed it, that they wanted me to articulate to you guys to say, okay, but you're gonna open up this commercial business to an R2 or R3 that could be in any R2 or R3, and some concerns about that. Is that, okay, what are you gonna do when the next person comes in? Because, I mean, as, Scott pointed out earlier, last time we were here, we have to think about it as a citywide issue
Right.
at this point, not specific to your site. So I just wanted to part of what I wanted to do was bring that feedback back to you guys, which I know you guys always like to hear, kind of what the board thinks as you guys consider the stuff, so we can be consistent, or at least have some of those discussions here and bring feedback back up to them.
My recollection from the last meeting, and I did have to leave during the discussion, but my recollection from the last meeting is that in a state licensed daycare, that the number of children in care is dictated by the square footage
Right.
and by the number of staff on hand. Is that
No,
right?
not the staff. It's only by square footage. The ratio doesn't come into effect until you're actually like in a commercial facility.
Okay.
With
So-
an in-home, it's all about square footage. So say if your house is a smaller square footage, you're only allowed maybe 4 children. I mean, the most you can have is 10, but it depends on how big of a space that you have, that the state will say, okay, well, your house is big enough, you're allowed to have the maximum of 10, or whatever.
10 plus those plus any that are relatives of the
Yeah,
caregivers?
unrelated. Mm-hmm.
That's, I appreciate what you ladies do, and I appreciate what both in-home and professional daycare services do in our community. My concern would be, as a resident in an R2 zone or in any zone, to have a neighbor that had 3 or 4 or 6 or 7 of their own related children, plus potentially 10 more others
Right.
in their care every day.
Mm-hmm.
I think it has the potential to be a problem within a neighborhood. It doesn't mean it will be, but it has the potential to be. And my concern is that, as Mr. Gravel stated, when we put something into ordinance, that we may know a specific circumstance of what we think it's going to be, but we cannot anticipate what every circumstance is going to be in every similar but different situation later on down the road. And I really do feel like this is a commercial type of exposure in a residential area. And all of us, I think for the most part, live in residential areas because it allows us some insulation from those things that otherwise commercially would be a distraction or a nuisance.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so I personally feel like opening up for conditional use for daycare or for any other commercial use is a slippery slope that I'm not in favor of.
I do want to point out that last time we were out here, we did let you know that we did go around to all of the neighbors on the entire street and tell them that we were there.
Right.
So,
And as I'm
yeah.
indicating, it's not your specific
Right,
and
right.
particular circumstance necessarily that I have any issue with. It's the fact that the next time this is requested, there may be some very different circumstances, yet we would have set a precedent to open Pandora's box.
Right.
And, I'm afraid it puts us in a situation of inviting things that might be difficult to deal with in the future. But that's my opinion, and there are 9 other people on this commission.
I just have a question of fact. Would we, each person that would come in, if we did allow this, would we have to vote on each particular,
Situations.
situation?
They would have-
So,
They would have to, go ahead, sir.
yeah,
They
we would have some.
conditional use and they would have a site plan. And the conditional use would be specific to whatever conditions, hours of operation, because they actually don't have an approved, I assume that they're not running an illegal business in the city right now. They don't have an approved conditional use permit that you could put conditions on hours of operation, parking, any improvements you want to the property. The site plan really only deals with it only deals with the exterior of the property. The conditional use could get into some of the details of the interior of the property if that's something you guys wanted to look at. So you could put conditions on both the site plan and the conditional use. The one thing I wanted to explain to you guys, though, if you make it conditional use, there's an exception to every rule, but you have to issue the conditional use. It's just what conditions are you going to put on the property, and are those conditions reasonably related, okay? So you give them a right to use their property conditionally. So by making this change, you're going to allow in the R2 and R3 districts a daycare in a commercial type atmosphere to be ran with specific conditions to that particular property. Does that make sense?
Yes, I just don't have we haven't had anybody come in complaining about, if I would have had some people come in and say, no, I don't want it next to my house, and I'm gonna assume that we can control, what kind of places,
Well,
come
you
in.
can, but the problem is, and I'm not doing a very good job of explaining, I apologize for that. Tonight, we're not looking at their project.
Mm-hmm.
Tonight, we're just looking citywide in every R2 and R3 districts in order to allow their project to move forward and allow them to apply for a conditional use permit and a site plan. We have to change our code to make it conditional, because right now it's not allowed at all in a commercial setting. Because how many kids can you have where it's not required to be a permitted daycare or what? 4. Unrelated plus any amount that are related. So to have the additional kids, they can have 4 right now where they are, exist, operate, and we have no regulations regarding it. More than 4, then they have to get state licensed, and then they are considered a daycare under our ordinances, and they're not permitted in the residential, and that's the way most cities are. But we have to change it citywide and make it conditional in order to consider their application for what they're doing. So tonight it's kind of, and I know it's a little bit abstract, but you have to consider all R2 and R3 zones where we brought back at the recommendation last time, making it conditional, the commercial operation, more than 4 in those districts.
I think some things I'd like to point out is I think that it would probably be a little naive for us to assume that there's not a whole bunch of illegal, unlicensed daycares operating in town. So thinking out loud, I think a benefit of this would be we'd have the opportunity to maybe bring some of those people, find them a way to be licensed and safer environments for kids. Have the fire marshal's inspection and everything. But I also definitely am concerned about, primarily now I'm hearing and thinking about the possibility of a commercial business buying a house, and maybe it's no longer a residential situation like what you're talking about, and then am I understanding correctly that
Absolutely.
At that point they could operate it outside of the 10 kid limit?
No, well,
the zoning
they would be
is-
limited by the square footage, but I think the original point and one of the considerations I think you guys need to think about, and this was pointed out by the board, is the fact that you could have a residential structure and someone could say, I'm going to buy that and I'm going to run a commercial daycare. And they could come in and apply and they could get the number of kids, because there's no ratio in residential, right?
Right, but
They could have,
But a group home, you can only have 20, if it's just a home with just daycare in it.
yeah,
okay, so 20 kids plus related kids.
that I'm not sure. I don't think related
so.
kids, because I think that's starting in ratio.
Because
if
they're not
between.
living in it and operating a commercial daycare, there would be no related.
Yeah,
kids.
it'd be ratio.
Okay. So,
Like, even
yeah,
when
but
we
that
become-
situation is they could do that in a residential neighborhood with the change proposed tonight.
So my only thing is there a way that we could, through the conditional use permit,
Required.
cap the number of kids, related or unrelated, limit this to only owner-occupied residence, that not somebody buying it. Could we limit those things and address some concerns, or would that not be practical? to
No, I think you
individually use?
could. I think for consistency's sake, though, I think what we would want to do is define that in the code.
Right.
You know, like almost create a new subcategory that would be, you would have, it's not a daycare less than 4. You can have 4 unrelated kids that you can watch and babysit. And kind of create an in-between between the commercial and the residential type application. And I think we'd have to look at that to see what state, because we want to be consistent with state statute and state licensing requirements, where we could say you can kind of have this in-home residential daycare, where it can be owner-occupied, and it can be, you know, no more than 10 kids total, including related or unrelated. I think we could carve that out, but I don't think it would be prudent to put that in just as a conditional use and then rely on the
Right.
conditions every time. I think we'd probably want to backtrack a little bit and create a new subcategory that would come in definition-wise to really, you know, make that very clear, so it wouldn't be on every board, on every situation, to say these are the conditions we want, so it's consistent.
What is the max square footage? What gets me 10 kids in my in-home daycare? What square footage do I have to be at?
I don't have my rule book in front of me. I don't
Is
remember.
it 1,200?
It's around that, because her house is 1,400 and we got approved for the
For all
10
10?
kids. Yeah.
Now, are you guys,
That's the limit period. It doesn't matter if you have 50,000 square feet.
where are you guys with your licensing requirement through the state right now?
Well, we were kind of on hold as of the last meeting, so we're still having to fix a few things for the fire marshal and for the state sanitation.
So are they going to continue, give you an extension?
Yeah, they can give us an extension. We'll just have to resubmit an application in February or March. Right, March.
But do you have to start the whole process over again?
No, that's where we were wrong. We
Okay.
contacted our state representative, and she said that all we have to do is resubmit another application, and it'll just run on for another 6
Okay,
months.
that's good.
So,
I think that the only way, although it's going to be out of my hands after this meeting, but just as a resident, as a current member of the board, the only thing I would only be comfortable if
We created a
proceeded with this
subcategory.
with amending the text like you're talking about to create a different category that was perhaps within the boundaries of the state statute, but more restrictive, you know, so that we were limiting the number of related, unrelated kids and
And we can do that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you know, there's zoning regulations. I mean, you know, most cities break down to, you know, less than 4 is not considered a daycare, you know, and they just break right along the state statute line. But that's not a zoning regulation. It's Department of Social Services, right? Is that who you guys go through?
well, it's the regulation of child,
And senior.
yeah,
services.
child and senior services.
Okay, Child
So-
and Senior Services.
4 to 10 would be considered a daycare, over 10 would be considered a group home, and group homes would not be allowed in R2.
Yeah, I mean, that would be the question is, so, and I don't know what, but, you know, kind of thinking this out loud is, we could create like, you know, less than 4 unrelated is not considered a daycare. How many kids would you allow them, both related and unrelated, on the, would you want to address the related issue in that subcategory definition, and what's that number? And then the third thing would be, you know, require it to be a lived-in residence. It has to be owner-occupied. Or could you rent a house and, you know, it has to be occupied as a residential structure? You know, or does it have to be owned and used as that? That would be my question on how you would want to formulate that up in
Well,
creating
I think
a-
that's what, thinking out loud, that's kind of what people are thinking, I think, is that we should be owner occupied. We're not trying to open up, like you said, Pandora's box, but yet at the same time not restrict people that are trying to do it the legal way.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that that's a good option. What are your guys' thoughts on it? Anybody else have any thoughts?
It has to be owner occupied. This is owner occupied, there needs to be a square footage requirement on it. I think that needs to be a little bit more restrictive than the state's requirement. Because 10 kids in a 1,200 square foot house is pretty tight. my personal feelings anyway. I think we need to make it as restrictive as possible if we're gonna go with it.
Do you guys want to address in something like this?
Sir, you want to step to the podium? My question is, since we don't have to be in, it sounds like tonight that if your extension and so forth that you all were talking about, we don't have to be in that big of, we have time to do this now, correct?
Well, I mean, obviously, I'm
I know
sure
they wanna
they would
move
like to
forward.
get it done as soon as possible.
Sure.
And you know, I would but we could have a draft ready and have it in the paper to, you know, what we would do is basically, the way I see we would do it is we would create a new subcategory that would be kind of like, I'm thinking about calling it like residential daycare.
Right.
You know, a new subcategory that would call it residential daycare. And then we would put these and say it would be any daycare in which there's this many kids, non-whatever, minimum square footage of this, blah, blah, blah. And then we would make that new subcategory conditional in R2 and R3, would kind of be my thought on how to do it.
Could you state your name and then relationship to the applicants, please?
My name's Richard Taylor. I'm Tiffany's stepfather, and I just wanted to add that when you're thinking of the things to add to conditional, we've kind of been talking about it, but make sure that the state licensing is one of the requirements.
Right.
Yeah, that's definitely a great
Thank you,
point,
sir.
is that we would actually, I think, put in the definition state licensed.
Right.
That would do it.
Yeah, which would eliminate some of the people that would be willing to
Yeah.
do it on the other end.
I think it would be wise to address the related and unrelated.
Number.
On
Yes.
that, may I make a suggestion or a comment?
Sure.
By that, I know that the state, within a residential home daycare, they don't require a certain amount of staffing. They have in mind one individual. Now, when you're thinking about that and the ratio of related and unrelated, I would suggest if they have maybe more than one staff, maybe like a cap for if it's only one, then 2 related children, or if there's a staffing of 2, maybe 4 related children, or you know what I'm saying?
Sure.
I think the only issue that I think that's a great idea for the conditions, but for the definition, it would be very clean if you wanted to just say, no more than this number of kids can be supervised, but it may not work for you guys in order to do that. But I think, you know, the staffing issue becomes very difficult for us to enforce and regulate through a conditional use. And that's the concern I have, is that it's like, well, we're going to have 3 staff, so then we can have 20 kids, and then 2 of the people don't show up to work, or they're not really staffing there. Not related to your project, because I don't think you guys would make a misrepresentation at all like that.
Well, you know, when we're talking about state licensed facilities, the state, the state does the inspections, and they come back and they do periodic inspections later
And
on down the
surprise
road.
inspections.
They monitor the staffing levels. Those state licensed facilities have reporting requirements that they're subject to. In my opinion, the city is ill-equipped to put other regulations of their own in place because there's no staff to monitor it. I don't
Right.
think that the city has the personnel and the capacity to actually, if conditions are placed, to actually verify that they're being complied with. And to Mr. Durbin's question earlier about conditions, you can put conditions on about hours of operation. You can put conditions on about any number of things. The problem becomes who monitors, who polices it. You end up with a situation, in my opinion, where you're going to force neighbors to report their neighbor for violations of those conditions, and that's not good. And I'm just going to say it, I think having 10 kids in a R2 or R3 zone in a daycare setting is wrong. If you buy a home in a subdivision, in a residential setting, you should have a realistic understanding of what you will and won't have in your neighborhood. And I don't think anyone in this community anticipates when they buy their home that they're going to have a daycare with 10 kids plus relateds next door. And I think we're doing a disservice to the people that own homes in this community if we're going to open it up to that. And it's, all kinds of respect to the two of you and what you want to do. Doing daycare is a fantastic service to the community, but we all have neighborhoods, and we should be able to trust that the integrity of our neighborhoods remain as they were when we moved in. And I think this talk about conditions and all these other things is putting a cart before a horse that really should never leave the barn.
Well, I disagree on the factor of most big businesses start with small businesses.
But they don't start in neighborhoods.
I know, yes, they do. They start in garages. They start in the guy's basement. They start all over the place. I think, that people are starting small. If we had, and we're gonna have people, if somebody comes in and they wanna put a daycare or whatever in, if the neighbors don't like it, they're gonna be here, or they should be here. There's signs up. That's my opinion on that.
But you can't start a body shop in your garage in your neighborhood.
Oh.
Because planning and zoning says you can't.
Yeah.
Now, if you do it, your neighbor has to be the one to report you for
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
But you can't do that in a neighborhood, and there's a good reason why. And we don't have people come in that want to open a body shop and say, I'll never have more than 2 cars because I live in a neighborhood. If I get more than 2 cars, then I'm going to go down the street in a commercial zone.
Well, I think the other thing, though, too, is they're not running it yet. I just want to make that point. I mean, kudos to the applicants for following the rules, and it goes to Scott's point that there's people out there not following the rules. But I don't know that we would really, unfortunately, this is one of those where we caught them doing it, and then we had it. I mean, this is really trying to plan and be prospective about it, and that's one of the things I think going to the neighbors. I don't know if we're really going to know what the neighbors are going to say until they're up and functional with the number of kids that are there.
Mr. Taylor?
I actually have a question about how many people are in a house. I don't think that's regulated or said anything about in any other circumstances.
It's not.
So if family happens to have 12 kids, they have 12 kids. You may not know that when you move into the neighborhood. Just think it's an oversight to say that daycare centers might be different.
But daycares bring with them different things. If there are 10 separate kids being brought by 10 different sets of parents every morning and picked up every afternoon, that is a potential nuisance to the neighbors that isn't necessarily the same type of nuisance when you've got a nuclear family that's got 10 or 12 or even 15 kids. There are...
And that should be part of the condition. If they're
But
going to
all of
have-
that becomes so difficult to manage and to police. And that's my point. And we have provisions in our code already to allow for those types of daycares. It just so happens that they're not in residential areas.
That's all I had.
Thank you, sir.
How many days do you operate or can you operate?
Well, technically by the license, every license is different. So whether we apply for it, we can apply for a 24-hour license where we can operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's stated per license. It's conditional compared to the state.
But you do have the
personally,
potential of
yes.
24/7.
Well, we do not want that.
Well,
we
yeah.
have families, obviously. We have dinner and kids to get to bed ourselves.
Right.
So, we would be Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., respectfully.
But this would open it up for somebody to do it 24/7.
Right.
And with 10 kids.
That's a lot. It's crazy.
I
And loud.
It's hard for me to imagine sitting on my back deck and any hour of the day with 10 kids running around out there. I have to agree that that kind of takes away from the quiet neighborhood setting. And I like kids too.
Well, there's a couple of options we have. Obviously one of the things we can do, depending on the pleasure of the board, is we have this, you guys can vote on this. If you want to bring it to a vote and, take it up to the board and see what they say about just purely this text amendment. The other option is we can go back and try to create this subsect daycare if that's something you guys want to do. Or we can just table it generally and you guys can think about it and give us some direction, staff some direction of if you guys want us to take any drafting or text amendments further.
It's kind of like Mr. Costello said, though, in the fact that if you make a subgroup of the special group just for this. I don't know, it just, the policing is the big thing with me, and the fact that we're going to make multiple different layers of restrictions on this that would beat the board here. But like you said, then it's going to be your neighbor giving a call because the 10 kids are in the front yard and they're all playing right here and they keep bouncing into your yard. So that's the thing that sticks in my mind is not your case or not the case overall, but just the policing of, we can make all the different regulations and the additions to what's there, but who's going to be policing it? That's fine.
I mean, I have no problem telling Jack when he gets back from San Diego that he has to inspect daycares. That'd be fine with me. I'd like to return that, but all kidding aside, I mean, you know, yeah, that kind of goes back to what I said before, is that I think in practical application, you know, our site plan only really looks at the exterior because we really don't try to get into any interior inspections or anything like that because we really don't have the capabilities.
I know we've done this in the past too, like when we do table something and do some research on whether it's applicable in this situation or not. I know when I came here 26 years ago, daycare was very limited here in this community. It was tough to find places to, and I'm sure we've doubled our size since then. I'm sure it's still a difficult situation for some families. So I think our hats are off that there is someone such as you ladies that are trying to do this. In other communities, have you seen other communities that have this kind of situation with daycare? What is, you know, we have looked at other zones.
I will be honest with you that the, you know, kind of residential has kind of always been protected as a sacred kind of cow thing.
That's what we
as not allowing any commercial. But you guys know my opinion that, you know, planning and zoning has to be looked at as an organic document and has to evolve with circumstances. But I will tell you that I have never seen a city that has created a sub. They've always just kind of broken on the line of, hey, you can have 4 kids, you can babysit them there. This is what state statute allows. It doesn't require you to be licensed. And, you know, people still do it, I know, and then they get caught by someone getting hurt there or something happening or an angry parent getting reported or something or a neighbor, and then, you know, the prosecutor gets a letter from the Department of Health and Senior Services saying, please enforce these, you know, your zoning regulations on them. So no, I don't think a lot of cities that I've ever seen have ever broken it down differently than the way we do. But that doesn't mean that we can't. It's just that's practically kind of how it's been applied.
May I interject for a moment?
Sure.
Our state representative for Child and Senior Services, her name is Wendy. What's her last name? I'm so sorry. Matlock. Thank you. Spacing it. She said that this is actually, she's been doing it for a couple of years in this area, and she said this is the first time she's ever heard about a city saying we can't.
Well, I don't know how long she's been doing it, and I don't know what her experience or background is. I only do municipal law mainly, and I've never seen it break down differently than this. So I just can testify to my experience on it.
Oh, you're fine.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
and
I mean,
she
most
said-
cities will say you cannot have a residential, you know, you cannot have a daycare in a residential area. They define daycare as more than 4 unrelated kids, because that's the way the state license breaks it down. So I don't know, you know, what other communities. I mean, that's the way it's always been in Warrenton.
I just know she does the surrounding
She does like
area.
4 or 5 counties.
Yeah, she does like 4 or 5 counties around here. She travels from Columbia. She said she's been doing it for about 4 years just in this area.
So I don't know what her.
I can tell you tabling this isn't gonna, I don't wanna table it. So.
Well, I was gonna go ahead and make a motion. Motions are always made in the affirmative regardless of the way that the person making the motion intends to vote. So I'll make a motion to approve the text amendment approval request.
I'll second.
So we have a motion by Mr. Costello, second by Mr. Kohler? To approve,
Recommend.
or recommend, yeah, not to approve, to recommend approval for the Appendix A text amendment, is that what we call it at this time? Because it has to be done in the affirmative, then everyone will vote yes or no on tonight based upon what you think about the text amendment, which will be making it conditional use in R2 and R3. Did I state that correctly?
That's absolutely correct.
Okay, and then no matter what we decide tonight, it will still go in front of the board
The board will have the ability to approve it or disapprove it.
based on our recommendation.
Right. The recommendation is not binding the Board of Aldermen. Yes.
Okay. It's like 2 weeks, I think, but, well, it might be next week. Next Tuesday. Okay? Does everybody understand the ordeal? Because I remember when I first got on this board, and that was always just backwards to me, and I teach this stuff, so. And it was just always backwards. Mr. Costello actually taught me that one night, so. All right, so we do have an affirmative, Mr. Costello, Mr. Kohler. Any other questions or concerns at this time?
At this point, we have not stated any conditions other than a general conditional use.
Well,
Is that correct?
That's, yeah, we are voting on whether or not you approve the text amendment.
Right, they haven't applied for their
They haven't
conditional
applied for
use yet.
conditional use at all yet, at this point. That would still come in front of you. At this juncture, it's just, do we approve the conditional, at the addition of conditional use for this type of facility in R2 and R3 to change the text amendment to do so. Okay? Any other questions or concerns? Roll call vote.
Mr. Martin?
I will say yes.
Mr. Schoenfeld?
And I see what the board says.
I will vote no, without, as it stands now, but clarify with further restrictions, my opinion might change, although I will no longer be a board member.
Thank you.
Mr. Schwab?
Yes.
Mr. Kohler?
No.
Mr. Dickey?
No.
Mr. Durbin?
Now, I'll make sure I get this right here. I'm letting me go on to, we're adding something else to it. Is basically what we're doing. We're saying we give permission for it to go forward, or we're saying, if I vote yes, well, that means that
It's just
we're
gonna go to
keeping
the
it-
board. All we're doing is
it's
making a
gonna go to the board.
recommendation to the board.
Okay,
All we're doing is changing the text at this point.
okay, I vote yes.
Go yes. Okay.
Mr. Costello?
No.
Mr. Deach?
Yes.
Mr. Cullum?
Yes.
So at this juncture, it would be a 5-4 vote in the affirmative to go in front of the board next. Have we decided, is it next Tuesday?
I'm not
The
sure
13th.
because I don't think it will go next Tuesday because I don't know that the publication will have time to be put in. So I would imagine it'll be the second meeting in Warrenton because the meeting from this week got rescheduled
Right.
to next week.
Okay. So at this time, we'll close the meeting and move on to the planning and zoning officer's report, which Mr. Graville says he has from Mr. Hamp, who is in sunny San Diego.
I don't know that there was a report for me to present. I don't think there is a report. It's just the appendix in his prior report, so I have no report on Jack's behalf.
But you'll report back to him with one.
I will report back to him and say I have no report. So I don't know what's coming or going with P&Z
Okay.
next month.
All right, sounds good, and I'm sure he'll let us know. Anybody else have anything for the good of the group?
Yes, I do.
Yes.
Mr. President, fellow board members, my name is Ron Dickey, and I'm a member of this board. I would like to talk about Section 405, 185D, Special Events Permit. I would like to read to you a passage from the Special Event Permit. A special event permit may be issued by the Board of Aldermen, provided that such event is not injurious to the general health, safety, and welfare of the city. The P&C Board has been tasked with the responsibility of processing all special event permits and making a written recommendation to the Board of Aldermen for final approval. No special event permits come before the P&Z board for the Warren County Fair. Why? At the Warren County Fair last July 2014, there was an accident from a race car that became airborne and went through a building, causing some personal injury. The P&Z board needs to be briefed on what issues caused this accident and what safety measures have been put into place to make sure this will not happen in the future, so we can make an informed decision on some special event permits pertaining to that area. The Fair Board conducted a motocross event on their new track in the fall of 2014, and the P&Z Board has not been briefed on the outcome of any safety issues which they feel should be in place to protect the participants and spectators during these events. In my opinion, the main problem here is that the applicant does not have any standards by which they can give the Planning and Zoning Board the information that we need to make an informed decision. I do not feel that an informed decision can be made from a 1,000-foot aerial view of the fairgrounds, which is only bare ground and does not show the setup of the event that the permit will cover. This is all that we have to work with for now, in my opinion. We need detailed scale drawings of the fairgrounds and all the buildings, gates, openings, road, parking areas, fences, barriers, and any other permanent structures, and number all these items on a legend on the drawing given their description. These drawings should be given or sold to the applicants by the Fair Board when they petition the Fair Board to hold a special event at their facility. Once a standard drawing has been made, a copy from that drawing could be altered to show the configuration for a mud bog, tractor pull, demolition derby, and so forth. The applicant could make copies of the drawings, and after the hearing with the P&Z board, they could make additions or corrections for the next year's event, and after so long, it will become routine and a painless process for all parties involved. I think that a member of the Warren County Fair Board should accompany the applicant through the special event process in order to answer any questions on safety in particular and any other questions that would only be known to the Fair Board. The only questions the applicant should have to answer are the ones they are physically in control of, such as parking cars, cleanup, hours of operation, security, will alcoholic beverages be sold, crowd control. I am not advocating that we stop special events until we get a standard drawing of the fairgrounds, but rather that we cooperate with each other and see that they are handled in a professional and successful manner. In the end, the applicant, the Fair Board, the P&C Director, the P&C Board, the Town Board, and the citizens of the community are after the same thing here, and that is to hold a successful event where everyone has a great time and everyone goes home happy, and most of all, without injury. I have found that there are some unique opportunities that arise during tough situations if you only look for them. I do not know who we have to see, where we have to go, or what we have to do in order to make this happen. But I would like to see all of the P&Z board members and the Fair Board members give this some very serious thought about what all they would like to see on the drawings and sub-drawings that would be submitted to us, as I believe it will make life much easier for everyone in the future, and the process can be executed in a timely manner and in harmony with the applicant. I am not here to place blame with anyone in this process. I am here seeking resolutions to these problems so we can become better equipped to execute our responsibilities. I appreciate your time and attention, and I am much honored to be a member of this board. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dickey. Any other questions or comments, concerns tonight before we adjourn? Once again, Mr. Schoenfeld, thank you for your service.
And I'd like to thank the board for welcoming me here and educating me about the process, and was planning on thanking Mr. Hanoff for his knowledge and expertise that he provided, but he's not here, and I'm angry at him anyway for being warm right now, so thank you all very much.
You're welcome. Mr. Deach?
I'd just like to say that I think Ron Dickey does have a valid point, and it would, I think, be of great help to us if we did have some drawings, as well as help to applicants in the future.
You know,
So
one of the
anything
things we can
do
ask
bring
Jack
that
to do
about.
when he gets back is send a letter to the Fair Board and invite them to a meeting and see if, we can address some of these issues, say, because inevitably, we've met with the Fair Board every winter, and we've had them come and talk to us, and we've spoken with them about trying to resolve some of the use issues out there. So if you guys are okay with it, I'll let Jack know to, send them a letter asking them if they'd please come and kind of discuss. This has been a new process every year, and just kind of would like to meet with them and see how the process was, and also kind of express some of the concerns that the city has, and see if we can get them to come to the table and talk to us a little bit about it.
And I think it would expedite the situation once it was brought in front of us every time, instead of having to go through the same thing every single time.
Yeah,
With every single applicant is different.
The drawings have been an issue.
Yeah.
But-
And we're coming into the next couple of months, we'll be getting applications again for that over there.
Yep.
So I'll ask Jack if it's okay with you guys to send the Fair Board a letter and just ask if they would please come to our meeting, and we'd like to discuss and kind of see, take the temperature and see where we're at.
Sounds good. Anybody else have anything to put on Jack's list? He's not here.
I'm okay with doing that.
I know. We all are. Entertain a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor say aye. Thank you. Have a great evening.